Now, one of the key challenges at this moment is to give employees and industries a clear roadmap about what happens next so that they can plan how to start reviving their companies. But the problem with that, Harshpati Singhania, is that at this moment you're dealing with an invisible enemy. The virus has a mind of its own. He's not under anybody's control, and therefore how do you revive confidence? How do you lay out a very clear graded roadmap when there's an invisible enemy still who's willing and waiting to strike?
I think you've made a very vital point. Confidence building is the key, and this has to go across sections of society. It is not an issue of a business or workers. It is you and me as citizens. If we have to go out, even if the shops are open, we need to go there. We need to be confident that if I go there, nothing is going to happen to me, because the reality is the virus is not going to go away. So we all need to work together to do this messaging, to explain this to people, and it's the government, it is the media, it is business which will have to do this. The second is, as far as money starts flowing, and when people have greater confidence that they can actually spend money and they don't have to look only at a survival mode, then they start becoming more confident in terms of going out and creating demand. So I would say that these two are critical factors in generating confidence in doing this. And also, of course, the health that we are in the days of the lockdown, we have been able to gear up to look at health and safety and sanity.
Uday Shankar, how do we ensure that job losses are minimized? The government so far has given a diktat, you can't sack. We know that's not working because several companies, especially the smaller and medium-sized companies, are laying off or sending people on furlough. What's your sense of how to deal with this problem in the larger economy and ensure that job losses are minimized to the extent that is possible?
Rahul, first and foremost, I think we have to recognize that it's a brutal reality that if people can't afford to pay their employees, they won't be able to pay their employees. Even if they get arrested or even if they are shot before a firing squad, if they can't pay, they can't pay. And that's a situation right from the individuals who employ in their domestic capacity to the corporates, big and small, and everyone in between. Nobody wants to fire people. You hire people because you use them to produce more, to sell more, and to make more money. So clearly getting rid of people is an option of the last resort. So some kind of, it's a socially everybody should be aware, and I think it was the right thing for the government to say that in the middle of the lockdown, as far as possible, people should not be laid off so that they can have the certainty of some earning. But that cannot be a perpetual situation unless, as Rasesh was saying, that there's some kind of backstopping, some kind of support, some kind of comfort. After all, there must be some wisdom in the fact that governments across the world are trying to step up and help people, pick up the salary bills. And it's really important in this country that we do this at all levels, because without that, I don't think we will be able to carry on with the same number of employees, with much lower production, with much lower sales, and with a massive setback to business. Life has changed and business cannot be as usual. That's the most important thing. Second thing that we need to recognize is that it's important to make sure that at every level there is some capacity for people to feel bold and entrepreneurial. People can take risks, but there has to be, there is already a huge fear on account of the virus. And then if there is fear that if we do something and my business fails, then I'm going to be left holding the can on my working capital, on my debt, on my other liabilities. It's going to be a massive problem. So the government needs to step in there and build an environment and take concrete initiatives to make sure that people are given the confidence that enterprises can go out and do what they're good at, and if they fail, they will be looked after.
Narendra Lal Kidwai, one of the things that we're hearing from government is that this is an opportunity for India to try and get some of the manufacturing that's now moving out of China and bring that to India, because global value chains are being reordered. But this has been true for a long time now. We haven't been able to capitalize so far. Most of the manufacturing going to countries like Vietnam, some even going to countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar, but not coming to India. What do you think the government should do at this moment to try and turn that promise into reality?
I think first and foremost, Rahul, our market itself is a very important market. So to the extent that we were importing goods from China, and as you know, that China was next to the US in terms of where we were importing goods, let's at least look at substituting that in terms of manufacture in India. And I say this because today we don't know which countries are going to put barriers, artificial or otherwise, down in terms of exports, because that is the big change in the world right now. Trade flows across the world are going to be affected. So maybe we can't build our hopes on new exports or supply chains right away, much as we must continue to look at it. But at a minimum, we can certainly get that manufacture which doesn't have to rely on other parts of the world, but feeds the Indian market. And I think, it's toys, it's furniture, it's small goods, it's all kinds of things which we can absolutely manufacture here. So I think looking at that opportunity is one. I think there's another thing we can learn from China. It is how quickly Wuhan bounced back. And let's look at those mechanisms, because I still, take heart from the fact that if 9 to 12 months is what people in industry who were polled by FICCI believe is what it takes to return to normalcy, that isn't bad. It's not like a recession after the World War, which goes on for 3 to 5 years for us in the country. So can we not jumpstart the economy now to shorten that 9 to 12 months return to normalcy to less?
But one of the things there is to ensure, Dr. Reddy, that there's enough containment, there's enough tracing, and you know exactly who's a threat. Now, if you saw what happened when liquor vents were opened on Monday morning, there were long queues, all social distancing went for a toss. When you compare with Wuhan, we must also keep in mind the reality of what's likely to happen in India. The moment people feel, okay, the lockdown's over, I can go. We saw a glimpse of that just as the liquor vents pan India. So how do we bounce back? Nainalal Kidwai talks about what happened in Wuhan. Is there at all a parallel? Is there anything we can learn from China, or do you think it's not applicable in the Indian context at all?
No, I think there are many lessons to learn, but things need to be looked at in the Indian context. You're absolutely right. And I think in that Indian context, and using the power of media, which all of you have, there is a whole aspect of messaging that for the next 12 months, factories may open, businesses should open, retail shops should open. However, wearing a mask and social distancing is a matter of saving your own life. I think it was said that, the decision to lock down was done by the Prime Minister, and it was a great decision, and the world and history will remember it. The methodology of opening up is the government, it's corporate, but it's society and individuals who can make that successful. And here, communication is key. So some of these norms have to stay with us, and therein lies the secret of being cautious but not over anxious. So like, was being said that we said offices are open, you can come to work. And this young girl rings up and said, my grandmother lives with me, lives with our home, and my father said, don't go to work. But this is not something, you can't not go to work for 12 months or 18 months, as long as it takes to get a vaccine. So we have to educate people to live with this and move on, to get the confidence. And on the earlier points, I really want to say one or two very quick things. That banks need the confidence to lend, and that must come by some level of a backstop from the government. Because if you look at the data, while the RBI enabled 1.5 lakh crores to be dispensed, I had a group of bankers talking to me this morning and said less than 4,000 crores has really gone out. So we need to create confidence in the business community, create appropriate behavior and confidence in the public, and then we move together towards restarting the economy.
No, we were already seeing an increasing level of debt phobia, especially in India and globally past beyond the 2008 financial crisis. Rashesh, we've heard that the RBI is trying to ensure that there's enough liquidity. Everybody says there's enough liquidity, but nobody is taking a loan because they are paranoid. So there's a huge level of debt phobia. Any ideas around how to deal with that? There's also a 3-month moratorium at this time for interest and principal repayment. To what extent can it be feasible? Can it be feasibly extended?
Yeah, I think it should be extended. If it's going to take, between at least 8-9 months for normalcy to come, we need to be able to give that kind of moratorium to customers. But I think what you said is very true. If you want to get the economy started again, you will need credit flow again. And we are always confusing liquidity is equal to credit flow. Liquidity is required, but it's not equal to credit flow like we have it now. We have a lot of liquidity. The banks are putting 7 lakh crores back with RBI in reverse repo and not being able to give it out to the as credit to the users of the credit. So I think the credit phobia, as you said, is real. Somebody needs to break the logjam, and we need to do that to ensure that this healthcare epidemic does not become an economic epidemic. The healthcare epidemic will get solved at some point. We'll get the vaccine, people will get herd immunity, whatever is the outcome that is going to happen on that. But the economic epidemic may take a long time to solve, and we need to forestall that. We need to do things now so that it does not become an epidemic. And for that, I think, as you said, credit flow, liquidity, confidence, and getting the economy started by taking risk is very important. And government and RBI can take risk. The businesses will take risk. The businesses are in the business of taking risk, and they will also follow through on this to make sure we get our economy started again.
Okay,
and not
so
go into
let me put
depression.
that question to Sulaja Firudeh Motwani, because the banks will say we have enough liquidity and yet no one is coming and taking credit. How do you think we can, when a black swan moment like the pandemic comes, risk appetite is only natural to be hit. How do you think we can work towards trying to instill confidence? What should be done, Ms. Motwani?
I think that it's not an easy problem to solve, but I think there have to be some focused efforts. Some of the larger sectors, let's say like automotive sectors, it employs almost 4 crore people, contributes close to half of the manufacturing sector GDP. I think if the government and the industry can work together in a collaborative manner, there's not one solution that fits all. But if you prioritize certain sectors which are going to bring back jobs, which are going to bring back business and create demand, then I think we can sit across the table with the decision makers, the policy makers, and come up with solutions across the table, for the MSMEs in the industry, for the dealers who are facing the customers, for the manufacturers who are taking the risk and investing in further building the business in these uncertain scenarios. So I think this time calls for collaboration, it calls for focused efforts and quick solutions. So I think this is really what is required to really get started with making a difference. This is what I believe.
What we've seen over the past 1 hour are a sense of imminently sensible ideas that can be worked on. There is no breastbeating about what's gone wrong, rather a rather positive approach about what needs to be done from here on to start bringing the economy back to life. And saving jobs clearly a priority, and there collaboration between industry, the people we have on our screens right now, and government very, very crucial.